Let's be honest, the Lamborghini Aventador overstayed its welcome. The Murcielago gave us 9 glorious years of service as the last Lamborghini V12 with an optional manual transmission before it gave way to something better, something more modern, something even more capable. Then Lamborghini pulled a Toyota 4Runner and figured out how to sell the same thing year after year for 12 years straight for more and more money. You might assume I'm talking about just the Aventador models like the SVJ, the Pirelli Edition, the Aventador S, and many more Aventador variations, but what I'm actually talking about are the Lamborghini hypercars that came out during the time that the Aventador was the flagship V12 model, or as I like to call them, Aventador reskins, because that's more or less what they are. Sure, they all have some insane new body panels that offer a striking new look, and some of them may even have slightly altered interiors, but at the end of the day, they all have the same hard points as the Aventador, and the new body has to be built around those. So if you squint hard enough, you can actually see how that one-of-one Lamborghini hypercar is actually just an Aventador draped in designer. How Lamborghini got away with this and sold these models for millions of dollars is absolutely beyond me, especially when at the same time other companies were releasing actual hypercars for similar prices. Today I want to discuss those few off Lamborghini hypercars, so drop a like if you want to see more videos like this, and make sure you're subscribed and hit that notification button so you can know when the next video drops.
I am TJ Hunt and you're watching Instagram.
Without further ado, let's start off with the Lamborghini Veneno. Okay, maybe a little bit further ado. I made this tier list that we're going to be using in the video, so link in the description, go check it out after the video, fill it out yourself, and let me know how you rank the cars in the comments. Released in 2013 for Lamborghini's 50th anniversary, the Veneno was marketed as a design that was focused on aerodynamics and cornering while dropping weight, which is cool and all, but it was ugly as it looks like it was a concept drawing for the Aventador, but they just released this to the public without winding back to make it more palatable for a wider variety of customers, which makes sense since they only intended to sell 3 coupes and 8 roadsters. I remember when this car dropped, and back then I thought it was pretty ugly, but every other 14-year-old thought it was sick. And to be fair, it does look like something out of a sci-fi movie. And it's still one of those unicorns that have a stupid amount of presence on the road, but does it truly live up to the hype? It uses the same carbon fiber monocoque, the same 6.5 liter V12 engine, and yes, Lamborghini tuned the engine to deliver 740 horsepower, which is more than the Aventador, but when you're paying millions of dollars for a Veneno, is 40 more horsepower really worth it? Especially when the Aventador 50th Anniversario, my personal favorite Aventador, came out the same year and had only 20 less horsepower. Yeah, the Veneno was way rarer and way more expensive, but a rare expensive pile of shit is still an expensive pile of shit. Performance-wise, it's impressive, but not $4 million impressive. In today's money, that would still make it almost $1 million more expensive than a Bugatti Tourbillon. 0 to 60 in 2.8 seconds and a top speed of 221 miles per hour is not slow, but it's not miles ahead of any other supercar of this caliber either. In fact, that's pretty much the same as an Aventador, and for less money, you could have had an Agera R, you could have had a Bugatti Veyron Grand Sport Vitesse, you could have had a Pagani Huayra, you could have had anything from the hypercar Holy Trinity and put a stupid spec on it and probably still came out of less cash than if you were buying a Lamborghini Veneno. I could have honestly put this car in my video about cars with pretty privilege if the car were actually pretty. The design, while undeniably futuristic and aggressive, feels way overdone. The sharp lines, the massive rear wing, and the exaggerated aerodynamics make the Veneno feel like more of a concept car or a GTA car than something that a company actually brought to market for road use. Veneno enjoyers back then might have been saying it was ahead of its time, but it's 10 years later. Lamborghini released their new design language with another car on this list, and now they have the Revuelto and Temerario, which look nothing like the Veneno, and yet the Veneno is still ugly. The McLaren P1 was ahead of its time. The Ferrari 458 was ahead of its time. Hell, the S550 Mustang was ahead of its time. The Veneno was just doing entirely too much. Back then, the design might have been visionary, but nowadays, and really the entire time for me, it just comes across as excessive and impractical. In the end, the Veneno might have been a collector's dream, but ultimately, it's an Aventador with a body kit. The question is, does the body kit and slightly more horsepower justify the price tag, or does it fall short of the hype? I think it falls short of the hype, and it's ugly, and it has the same interior as the Aventador. Like, if you're gonna sell a car for that much more money, like an egregious amount more money than the car that it's based on, at least give it a bespoke interior along with the body kit on the outside. And for that reason, it's going to the bottom of the tier list. Next, you wanna know what else shared an interior with the Aventador? Basically every other car on this list, but the one that I really like is the Centenario. Released in 2016 to celebrate the 100th birthday of Ferruccio Lamborghini, the Centenario is actually a masterpiece. With only 20 coupes and 20 roadsters produced, it's almost as rare as the Veneno, but I don't mind the fact that more of these exist, because why would I want to see more Venenos? I think with everything going on in the world right now, the last thing we need is more Venenos on the road. Using, of course, the same engine as the Aventador, this one's actually pushing significantly more power than the Aventador SV, the 50th Anniversario, the Veneno, and even more horsepower than the SVJ at 770 horsepower, making it the most powerful V12 Lamborghini had ever produced at the time. Because there is a car on this list that makes more power than the Lamborghini Revuelto and sounds leaps and bounds better than everything everything else on this list, so stay tuned. Even with 770 horsepower, the Centenario didn't just aim for straight line speed, as it was also the first Lamborghini with rear wheel steering for improved agility. This made it more nimble around corners than you would expect from a car that is as wide and as long as it is. For reference, the Centenario and the Aventador for that matter are longer than a 4-door BMW M3 from the longest, biggest, widest generation of BMWs we've ever seen. And they damn near weigh as much too. Now I'm not gonna lie, this design was as perfect as you could get from Lamborghini in my opinion, without taking design cues from older cars, and we'll get into that later as well. The carbon fiber body was sculpted to optimize for aero, but unlike the Veneno, the Centenario was still aggressive yet so clean. The massive rear diffuser and active rear wing that actually raises up, unlike the Aventador, produced more downforce, ensuring the car stays glued to the road at high speeds, but it was done in a way that in my opinion wasn't nearly as garish as the Veneno. And if you ask me, this is the car that should have shaped the current era of Lamborghini design and inspired the Aventador successor. If you look back through the recent history of the automotive industry, history usually tends to repeat itself. The new Mustang drops, the Shelby models come a few years later. The new Ferrari drops, the new hardcore track focused version drops a few years later. Then shortly after, the really limited convertible hardcore track focused version comes. The new M car drops, the competition model comes, then the CS and the CSL models drop. In this case, the new Lambo flagship came. Then they release a car like the Reventone that sort of gives us a preview into what the next car is gonna look like. So when the Veneno dropped, I was worried. But then the Centenario dropped, and so did my jaw. They could have stopped right there. I don't think there's a single person older than 18 who thinks that the Centenario looks worse than the Veneno. And if the Aventador successor came out looking more like a Centenario, I think it would have seen an even more positive reception. But unfortunately, they milked the Aventador for all it's worth and dropped 5 more masterpieces. But anyways, the Centenario isn't just an S-tier vehicle, it's an S-tier Lamborghini in terms of design of Lamborghinis in general. So it's going straight to the top. Now that we know the best and the worst Aventador reskins, let's go ahead and fill out the middle. Now y'all might not have even known this car existed, and if you haven't heard of this car, I don't blame you. It was actually released as a one-off, making the SC18 Austin not only the ugliest Aventador reskin, but the rarest one. If you have the rarest car, but the reason it's so rare is because you're the only one that wanted it, is that actually a flex? I don't know, y'all let me know in the comments. This was Lamborghini's first custom car developed by their Squadra Corsa racing division. It was designed to be a track-focused monster, and I'm pretty sure it was probably made because one of their Squadra Corsa clients had an absolute fuck ton of money. And in the same way that the French aristocracy used to love sculpted shrubs because it allowed them to play God over nature, this guy wanted to play God over Lamborghini and make them design a car to his heart's desire regardless of how fucking disgusting it looked. But I do have to give him a little bit of credit because I am a fan of the Centenario taillights and they did make their way onto the rear end of this vehicle, so good shit to whoever came up with that idea, but that's where your credit ends because I'm finna get on your ass. Because I'm honestly tired of looking at this Nimrod body kit looking ass car. Get him. This Lamborghini X Mansory looking ass car. Get him. Bootleg wannabe Pegassi Zentorno looking ass car. Get him. Like, why do we keep praising these one-of-one cars just because they're one-of-one? I take a one-of-one shit every single day. Wait, did I take a shit yesterday? I took one today and it consisted of different things in my last shit based on what I ate, but at the end of the day comes to an end. Wait, shit is still shit, and I call it like I see it. The SC18 Austin is an absolute abomination. But in 2020, the Squadra Corsa team actually redeemed themselves with a track-only monster that a lot of us know and love. The Asenza SCV12 was sick, and since they had to sell it to more than one person, they actually had to make it look good. Imagine a world where 40 SC18 Austins exist. I'd actually probably just move to Mars at that point. Not only did they make it look good, but it got a significantly modified chassis to the point that it's admittedly less of an Aventador reskin. Technically, it was still built on the bones of the Aventador and uses the same engine, but the chassis was significantly modified to meet FIA safety standards. And via a ram air intake, they were able to bring the Aventador power plant up to 830 horsepower. That makes this the most powerful V12 Lamborghini has ever sold, even topping out over the new V12 in the Revuelto. Combine that with a completely stripped interior, full cage, harnesses, and the fact that they dropped the shitty E-gear single clutch semi-auto for a 6-speed sequential transmission, and you have not just the track focused one-off, but an actual track car that isn't road legal. What series will it actually see track time in? The only series where it actually complies with all the rules along with all the other Asenza SCV12s. Kind of going off on a side rant here, but this is exhibit A of why GT1 needs to make a return. The Murcielago raced in GT1, the V12 Vantage raced in GT1, the Viper raced in GT1, a 911 modified to the same degree as the Asenza SCV12 raced in GT1, and this is basically an Aventador race car that deserved to duke it out with a hypothetical race car variant of the 812 Superfast class as well, along with the Ford GT Mark IV, the Wyra R, maybe even the P1 GTR, and other cars of this caliber. All these really high-end supercars and hypercars that get race car variants that can't actually race in any series would see more track time than just a handful of times a year at private events that have to be made, because a racing series no longer exists for brands that for some reason keep making these cars that exist somewhere between GT3 and Le Mans prototype but don't actually have a racing series that they comply with. Remember how I said there was a car on this list that was not only the most powerful but the best sounding car on this list? You know how with the Centenario, which in all honesty sounds like a regular Aventador, a couple of the owners took their cars to Gentani to make them sound like a race car? This is the race car that it sounds like. The guttural scream of the SC-V12 is just absolutely insane. Look, I've heard the Diablo GTRs and SVRs, the Mercy GT1s, all the V10 Gallardo and Huracan race cars, but none of those compare to the sound of the Asenza SC-V12. Because it's the fastest and best sounding Aventador reskin, I can't put it any lower than good, and it is one of the better looking cars on this list, but I just don't think it's on the same level as the Centenario or the other car that's going to make this list into the incredible tier. Don't get me wrong, I think it's a good looking car, but I do think sacrifices were made to prioritize function over form, and if it were a street car it would have looked even better, but since it isn't street legal, it does suck that it can't race in any series, and we'll never actually see the Asenza V12 in the heat of battle being pushed to its limits at the hand of a professional driver. With that being said, it's getting put in the good category because it is actually good. Before we move on to the car that changed Lamborghini forever, I want to discuss the one-off reskin that, unlike the SC18 Austin, actually is a flex, and honestly it's just one of the coolest cars on this list. Imagine they're both owned by the same person. I'm just talking shit. Anglaze. This one-off roadster was also created by Lamborghini Squadra Corsa and was designed by Centro Stile? I don't know. Centro Stile is Lamborghini's design division that makes some of the most unique Lamborghinis of the past 20 years. Like, do you even know what this is? Me neither. It's low-key built like a Hot Wheels, but it's kind of cool. People are always talking about SVJ Roadster this, Ultimate that, oh, the Centenario is so cool, but have you seen an SC20? Every detail of the SC20 is customized to the owner's preferences, from the exposed carbon fiber elements to the exclusive Bianco Fu white and blue Cepheus blue accents. Yeah, I feel like I'm too poor to know about Bianco Fu. The is a Fu. It was white. And to be honest with you, just looking at this, it's clearly the second coming of the Aventador J, but there's so many bespoke parts on this car that I've never seen on any other Lambo. I know they probably had to get those headlights and taillights reapproved, which I'm sure cost a ton of money. They probably had to get those rollover hoops crash tested, which cost a ton more money. This isn't just a car, it's an experience. It's a vibe. It offers an open air experience different to the Veneno Roadster, different to the Centenario Roadster, that brings you closer to the road and the environment around you. Lamborghini really was doing all these open air variants before all the new ones came out of the woodworks, and this is honestly the coolest one. The Elva really just feels like a 720S with the roof cut off, and likewise with the Aston Martin V12 Speedster. It literally looks like you could take a Sawzall to a Vantage and get a similar result, but Lamborghini really sunned these other car companies with this one. I don't want to put it up top because I still feel like it's not as cool as the Centenario or the other car that I want to put up there, but it just feels like a crime putting it in good. Screw it, it's going to the very bottom of the top, just for the fact that it's actually doing more than being an Aventador body kit. Like, I know there are other ones on here that are doing significant changes to the powertrain and whatnot, but like, this one is actually doing something where it's like you're not looking at it and going, oh, that's literally just an Aventador. I bet if y'all saw this driving around, y'all would not guess it's based on an Aventador, and if it didn't have Lambo logos, you wouldn't guess that it's actually even a Lambo. Definitely not from more than 20 yards away, because look at the shape of that thing. That's giving KTM Expo. Now let's dive into arguably the most groundbreaking Aventador reskin, the Lamborghini Sion. Released in 2019, the Sion was Lamborghini's first hybrid, marking a bold step into the future for the brand, but something that nowadays is just expected from exotic car brands. Only 63 coupes were made, which commemorates the year 1963 when Lamborghini was founded. Then there were a further 19 roadsters, and they all use the same V12 that I'm tired of talking about at this point. But the thing that was interesting about this car is that it's the first car in the world to use a supercapacitor in their hybrid powertrain. While the SC V12 made its way past 800 horsepower using more old-fashioned conventions, Lambo put a mild hybrid system in the Sion that only adds an extra 34 horsepower, bringing the total to 808 horsepower. But to be fair, the system isn't just about more power, it's about responsiveness. People People who have driven it say that the noticeable difference really isn't so much in the flat out acceleration or the top end, but in the way it fills gaps at low speeds and in between those archaic single clutch E-gear shifts. Also, I'm sure the hybrid technology in the Scion was just testing grounds for the Temerario and the Revuelto, which is kind of crazy to pay $3.4 million to be a test dummy. But like I said, what sets the Scion apart is its use of a supercapacitor instead of a traditional lithium-ion battery, which you would see in a Tesla or something. This allows the hybrid system to store and discharge energy more quickly, giving the car an immediate boost when needed. I'll be honest, that sounds like a band-aid for an issue that could have been dealt with a dual clutch transmission, but I digress. The Scion wasn't just a testing ground for the hybrid technology that ended up in the Revuelto, but unfortunately it held the same place in the lineup as the Reventone did 10 years prior. This vehicle ended up being the Lamborghini hypercar that inspired the aesthetic that was adopted by the latest flagship V12, which, don't get me wrong, I've kind of warmed up to the Scion and I actually like how the Revuelto looks, but I'm kind of glad they brought the design back down to earth a little bit for the production model. But like I said earlier, I think it could have looked even better if the front end was more heavily influenced by the Centenario. I'm also glad they dropped the hexagonal taillights and wish they brought the Y-shaped ones to the Temerario as well. I don't get why they feel the need to use hexagons as the basis of their design, like it's not that deep. As an automotive photographer, I honestly really want to photograph one of these more than any other car on this list because of how intriguing the design is. And I said intriguing, not good looking, big difference. And as much as I've warmed up to this car, I still don't quite like it, and it destroyed the idea in my head of a Revuelto that looks more like a Centenario, so it just makes me wonder why this car even exists. So everybody remembers the Countach, right? Matter of fact, everyone loves this Countach. So what I don't understand is why everyone hates this Countach. It was a hybrid like the Scion. Matter of fact, it shared the same powertrain as a Scion, which, okay, fair enough, I agree. But the Revuelto's design being less controversial than the new Countach was absolutely beyond me. Visually, the new Countach retains the signature wedge shape and scissor doors that made its predecessor design icon, but it incorporates modern touches that reflect Lambo's new angular design language. The sharp lines, aggressive stance, and modern lighting elements create a presence that's just as bold as the original. While the interior might be the only street legal interior in this video that doesn't share air vents with the original Aventador. I mean, like, it's slightly modified. Like, I'm sure it's plug and play. If you go to your local Lamborghini dealership and the parts department actually lets you buy these air vents, it's probably gonna actually have a different parts number. If I recall correctly, when the Countach first dropped, people were mad that it didn't come with all the crazy vents and the iconic wing of the original Countach, but the thing is, the original Countach didn't have all of that. The most iconic Countach, the one people remember the most, is the 25th anniversary edition, which is an LP 5000 QV with modifications essentially. Basically the Aventador 50th Anniversario of the 80s. However, the original LP 400 didn't have the aero, it didn't have the wing, it didn't have the vents, none of that. While some might argue that the original was a tad under-designed, I'd argue that the LP400S is the cleanest one, and it looks like this is the one they modeled the new LPI 800-4 after, and I think people need to get over their 80s nostalgia because that was for sure the right move. With an exception to the Centenario, the Countach pretty much trumps all the other Aventador reskins as far as design. Not to mention, there's a special place in heaven for the customers of these vehicles because the spec game was absolutely immaculate. If any of the original owners of the Countach are watching this, I hope your pillow stays cool on both sides tonight. It's like there was a leaderboard at Lambo headquarters and all the Countach owners were trying to outspec each other. We could low-key make a tier list for Countach specs alone. Like, check this out. Like, bruh, look at this. Red with white interior on white wheels. That doesn't even work on any other car, but this car just does. Look at this. What is that? Viola Pacife? That is sexy. Oh my God. Make purple great again? Yeah, that belongs on that account. Look, bronze on silver wheels. Like, are you serious right now? Aventador owners would never. Blue on tan? That, oh my God, that's pressure. That is pressure. Absolute pressure. Then we got bronze on bronze. That's actually kind of hard with the white interior. I'm usually not even that big of a fan of white interiors, but today it gets a pass. On the Countach, it certainly gets a pass. What is that? Signal green? Oh my, unbelievably hard. I'm telling you, bro, they don't hold back. They don't hold back. Even just black with the tan interior, that is hard. Look at this. Is this like teal? No, this is British Racing green over tan. Oh my God. Oh my God. That is hard. Like, what color even is this? I don't even know what that's called. Can somebody please comment and tell me what color that is? That is tough. Only on this vehicle. Like, I don't even think I would like that on an Aventador, but it just works. Like, they're thinking of specs that I would have never even thought of. I think I found my favorite one. Like, actually be for real. Metallic, like dark orange with the, oh my God, that's so tough. Damn, teal. I don't know about the white interior with the teal, but overall, that is still a hard spec. Even just basic specs like the black with the tan with the bronze wheels, like, yo, this orange with this tan interior is so hard though. Or is it white? Even still, that is tough. Yeah, no, I think I found my favorite spec. If I had to change anything, I would put silver wheels on it, but other than that, yeah, no, I found my favorite spec. I'm usually not even that big of a fan of orange cars. But you know what though? When I am a fan of orange cars, it's usually a Lamborghini. Honestly, how are y'all talking this car for real? I don't get it. It doesn't have a bad angle, and honestly, the car is more straight flowing lines than it is triangles and hexagons, so the hexagonal taillights actually work. It kind of caters to the whole retro vibe. Bro, put this up top. This is fucking incredible. I changed my mind. It does look better than the Centenario.